These days, if I'm in the mood for some LGBT plus cinema, all I need to do is go to one of the many streaming services out there and browse an entire selection dedicated to queer cinema. Hundreds and hundreds of these films ready to view at the click of a button. When I was growing up, not only were queer films made much less frequently, but the handful that did exist weren't readily available and usually involved me having to stake out the IFC channel hoping one might get played. Then in the early 2000s, there was this boom in queer cinema. Probably due to the rise of digital filmmaking, which made making a film more affordable and all around easier. Suddenly my local Blockbuster was getting flooded with these low-budget indie queer films. In more recent years, I've heard some of these films being criticized for their overall quality, but to me it's like, hey, most of these films are probably someone's self-guided passion project made on a shoestring budget. It's not like Hollywood was chomping at the bits for queer content back then. They did what they could with what they had, and I think that deserves some recognition. My favorite queer film is also a film that came out during this boom. It's also a film I don't think would ever get made today, but not for the reasons you're probably thinking. This is the 2002 dramedy, The Trip. The film starts off in 1973 and tells the story of Alan, a young closeted Republican who meets Tommy, a gay activist. The two fall in love, and the film follows them and their friends over the course of 11 years, and their story is set up against the backdrop of queer history. The film seems to have a slightly higher budget than a lot of the queer films from this era, especially regarding the soundtrack. But this doesn't mean that it didn't cut corners for budgetary reasons, like filming at the director's home or shooting day for night. Look, if you're an aspiring filmmaker and you're looking to learn how to correctly shoot day for night, no worries, Professor Dave is here. When shooting day for night, don't ever do it. Class dismissed. My favorite thing about this movie is also the reason why I feel it would never be made today. Those of you familiar with my channel have heard me mention that I am a sucker for movies that don't stick to one genre, or that will randomly switch genres. So if you're familiar with this movie, I think you know where I'm going with this one. The majority of this movie is a historical dramedy about Alan, as he goes from a self-loathing closeted man to a respected gay activist. But in the film's third act, Alan and Tommy embark on a road trip, and the film randomly turns into a gay outlaw road trip movie. It's such an abrupt 180, and I just love it. I say this movie probably wouldn't be made today because I think there's more of a demand for queer cinema, so what films could get away with back then probably would not fly today. In other words, there would most likely be a producer today that would insist that a film can't randomly shift from Milk to Thelma and Louise. And that producer's correct. Most people don't enjoy genre whiplash. But I say, hand me a neck brace and let's do this again. I also have to credit this film for educating me on a lot of gay history. For example, it's because of this movie that I know who Anita Bryant is, and she's a peach.
To go on a crusade across the nation and try to do away with the homosexuals, then we certainly would have done it on June the 8th after one of the most overwhelming victories in the country. But we didn't. We tried to avoid it and went into a place called Norfolk, Virginia, and were met with protest and all kinds of problems. And
Security agent. No, let him stay.
No.
Let him stay.
Well, at least it's a fruit pie.
The Trip is one of the most unique and interesting gay movies around, and I wish the writer-director Miles Swain did more films. I would love to see what else he'd make. Thank you so much for watching. If this is the first video you've come across, this is not my first video for the month. Here's a playlist that'll have every video that I'm making for Pride Month.